Hey everybody, who's your Jedi here? I just finished watching the first two episodes of Avatar: The Legend of Korra, and I wanted to share a few of my thoughts with you. I kind of gotten out of Avatar, to be honest. I hadn't really watched any episodes in a long time, and even when the show was kind of in the works, I wasn't paying a huge amount of attention to it. But I was still interested, so I sat down and watched the two episodes, and this is really very, very good, very solid television. It's visually, it's very nice in terms of acting. The voice actors are all doing a stupendous job. Even if you pay really close attention to the music is wonderful. I'm really loving that. But let's get to a little bit more detail. Let's talk about Korra herself. Now, the guys who created the show have said that Korra is meant to be the anti-Aang, and they are not kidding about this. She is really the polar opposite of Aang in just about every way imaginable. And they even established it very, very early on in the episode that Korra, she's an ace when it comes to the physical aspects of bending. She, at 5 years old, could water bend, earth bend, fire bend. She is, really one heck of a good physical combatant. She knows her stuff. But she admit, it's been said, she really is extremely weak on the spiritual aspect of it all. Meanwhile, Aang was the complete polar opposite. He was a very Zen guy. He was raised in a monastery. He was, a little monk. When it was the physical aspects of combat and, learning firebending, waterbending, and earthbending that made up the crux of his story. Now, another thing that's different is that the original stories was sort of, kind of a walking the earth, going from the Southern Water Tribe through the Earth Kingdom up to the Northern Water Tribe, and then everybody was running around in the Earth Kingdom for a long time. And there was the whole third season where everybody was in the Fire Nation. Here we're basically going to be sticking to Republic City, this city that they've created. It's got elements of 1920s Shanghai, bits of New York, a little bit of Hong Kong. So here it's as the good folks on TV Tropes have put it, the city of adventure, and I'm liking this. Kind of feels a little bit like Batman with Gotham City. I think that's sort of an aspect of the series that I think is going to be a lot of fun for us as viewers to check out. But let's go on. Another thing that's changed is I think the main theme. Now, of course, this is just the first two episodes. We're still kind of getting a feel of what's going on in this world, how things are going to break down. But in the first series, it was very much, I think, a case of, and I'm not going to try and get too political here, but I think the main thing was Fire Lord Sozin was a big believer in imperialism. He's like, okay, I've got my armies, and of course his predecessors as Fire Lords, I should say. We've got our armies, we've got all this technology. We're going to go out and we are going to conquer the Earth Kingdom. We're going to conquer these other people. We're going to colonize. Very, very much, the classic 19th century, 17th century style of imperialism. Now we jump ahead to the Korra's world, which is basically meant to be an equivalent to the 1920s. Well, not that there wasn't still imperialism still going on in the 20s. It was. But World War II was coming up, and that's sort of the last hurrah for the armies marching through the capital city of a country. Like this place belongs to us now style imperialism. Here we've got the conflict between Benders and the Benders and the Equalists. So very much here. And again, not to get too political, but it seems sort of like, the 99% versus the 1%. I don't really think that's the best metaphor, but it's something that makes sense to contemporary audiences. But if you look more at the social history of that time, in American history in particular, you had things like, if I remember right, like the Zoot Suit riots in LA. So here it's more a case of, class and culture and those things coming into conflict, which were just really starting to really pick up some steam in the 20s. Now, of course, if you want to go and try and do the metaphor for civil rights, that deal didn't really take a huge jump until the 60s, but again, this is more, I think, a case of classism. And in the 20s, that was a really big thing. Wealth versus poverty, the Great Depression. You had the communism. The communists said they had the Russian Revolution in Russia just a few years before the 20s kicked off, and the communists took over everything. Communism, communist, and socialism as were kind of big deals in there. This was a day can't talk. This was a big deal in the 20s. Because unions hadn't quite formed then. So again, Korra's kind of dealing with simply problems that she's not exactly going to go out and be able to punch. You can't go out and you can't punch inequality in the face as much as most people would like to. You can't. So that's part of what she's going to have to learn is how to deal with this. How does she, a very physical, hands-on person, deal with this? How does she do this? And that's part of the Avatar's role, is to be a peacemaker. So I think that's going to be one of the really interesting challenges for her. Now, if Aang had been dealing with this situation, he's got that sort of natural talent for that. Bringing people together, building consensus, things like that. That's what he was really good at. I mean, it's pretty good for a 12-year-old kid. But anyway, let's move on. A couple of the voice actors, man, I am really excited about some of these people. First of all, let's talk about Tenzin's VA. J.K. Simmons, he's one of those guys. He's done a whole bunch of stuff. Most of people probably know him as J. Jonah Jameson in the Spider-Man movies. I tend to always think of him as Emil Skoda from Law and Order, but he's also the green M&M in the M&M's commercials. But anyway, no, he's a wonderful actor, very good voice actor. I'm thrilled to see him in the show. He's just such a fun guy. I love him when anything he's in. He's one of those actors, kind of like Morgan Freeman, who turns up in places you would never expect to see him in a million years, but he's always such a delight. Anyway, we also have Janet Varney. This is the first time I've ever heard of her, but she's the voice of Korra, of course. And I did some checking on it. She's apparently a pretty well-established comedic actress. And she's done some work with Riff Tracks. And anybody who's done work with the Riff Tracks guys is gold in my book. I love the Riff Tracks guys. They're basically the old MST3K guys. And who doesn't love Mystery Science Theater 3000? Anyway, but the one who I'm really interested in, really want to keep an eye on, is the voice of Mako, David Faustino. Now, if you're somebody my age, you basically remember him as Bud Bundy from Married with Children. And, I watched Married with Children all the time growing up. And the show was a pretty darn hilarious show, and he's a very funny actor. But, that's basically the only thing that I really know him from. So when I found out he was on the show, I was like, not opposed to it in any way. I certainly wasn't familiar with any of the guys' work beyond that show. But I'm really liking it. We haven't seen too much of Mako. We haven't really gotten a strong feel for him yet. But I have got the impression that this is a guy with a lot of layers. He seems to be very kind of a tightly wound guy, takes things seriously. But, in episode 2, we get to see these little hints that there's more to this guy than what's on the surface. The part where he's sitting at the window looking out over at the airbending temple. You can kind of get the feeling that there's some melancholy to this guy. There's longing. There's things he wants out of life. He's got goals and dreams and all this other fun stuff. And that's completely mirrored by Korra. And some people are already going on and think, okay, this is going to be the Zutara of this series. I really don't want to get into that. Shipping in fandom is a messy, ugly business. I don't want to be part of that. We'll see what happens in the show. But let's talk about Bolin, Mako's brother. I'm liking this guy. I sort of like the part where he goes, "She's the Avatar." That was a Sokka moment right there. And I was so kind of glad to see that sort of thing wasn't being forgotten, because I think the show really needs that comedic presence. And God knows we're all gonna miss Sokka, who, speaking of which, confirmed by Katara in episode 1, Sokka's gone. And if you apparently believe what's going on in the Avatar wiki, apparently Toph and Zuko have gone to the Pearly Gates as well. So it looks like for sure Katara is the only one who's still around for sure. Although, if I had to pick anybody else from the world, Avatar, the previous series, to still be around, I'd really like it to be Azula. We never did get a very good bookend on what happened to her. Behind the sort of little footnote word of God that she ended up in an insane asylum. So I think there's more there to kind of find out what's going on with her. But another thing that I'm really liking is that they're continuing the trend that you really have to work at it for your power, for your skill in the Avatar world. Katara, Aang, Toph, all of them really all had to bust their butts in order to get better at what they were doing. And, this whole joining the pro bending thing, this is something that plays well to Korra, and as Tenzin said, it's something that fits with her. Not everybody is cut out to learn, meditating in a monastery. So again, this is another thing that I like. Now, one other thing that I want to say before I wrap this up. I'm really, really very interested in who those other people were sitting around eating at the airbending temple. Are they airbenders? Did the Aang do, as the popular fan theory is, use the spirit bending to sort of imbue other people with airbending powers? And if that's true, why is Tenzin the only master? Is this something, maybe he make the decision to start doing this to people very late in his life? And, don't avatars live an awful long time, usually? If we do the math on this, then Aang would have died at most while he was in probably his 70s, which is, I think, fairly young for an avatar. So, how did Aang die? Did he just, pass away in his sleep? Or did he, somebody actually take him down once and for all? I don't know. But I'm really looking forward to find out. So, short version, Avatar, Legend of Korra. This is really good stuff. I cannot wait to see more. And yeah, this is quality television, people. It's worth your time. Excuse me. All right, guys. Well, I'll catch you next time. Later.